Chris is a professor of political history, leadership, and public policy at Canberra University in the capital city of Australia. Chris, I'm not sure how much of the conversation you've managed to catch so far, but we've heard all the products exist, everything exists, everything is available to be done, and it's not happening. So please explain what's up.
Yes, I love your concept, Dom, of we know where to take the horse to drink, but how do we get it to drink? And great contribution so far this session. Thanks for including me in it. My job is to kind of politically frame this, how we got to this mad point and where we go from here in 5 minutes. Big ask, but let's go. So very essential to understanding what's just happened is we need to take deeply into our hearts and minds and activist selves the deep truth that human beings are herd animals. So what made the herd run in the direction it did in relation to the last few years and the experience of the pandemic? How did we end up at this position of very low systems performance in terms of public health? Well, there are a few really important factors in it that don't explain everything, but they explain a lot of it. The first thing is, especially in the Anglosphere, the dominance of laissez-faire thinking. So, of course, that's partly driven by global capitalism. People want to make a buck. They don't want to think about how they're making it. They see interventions that could make making money safer as an impediment, just friction. Let's get it out of the way. Of course, we have some contending institutions in terms of social democratic political parties and unions that stand against that. But the impact of private enterprise globally has been a really powerful factor in the let it rip mentality that's come to dominate. The second thing is that it's, again, especially in the Anglosphere, political parties of a conservative nature have very much dominated the realm. Political parties seem to have an inbuilt bias in Australia, Britain, and the US in terms of winning more often than our Labor Party, the British Labor Party, or the US Democratic Party. One of the big driving factors in that, I think, is that conservative parties understand viscerally that moving votes is about emotion, not reason, not facts. Whereas on the social democratic side of politics, where I think it's fair to say many COVID activists reside, people generally think it's all about facts and reason. If you shove enough facts and reason down people's throats, they'll go along with it. Not true. We know that from climate science. Very important that we come to grips with that fact. But the fact that conservative political parties have dominated our parliaments, your Congress, that has really backed in that free enterprise, laissez-faire approach, including to public health, which has killed so many people, basically. On top of that, and really kind of intensifying it, is the polarisation that's come through hyperpartisanship, disinformation, the political inflammation driven by bad actors internationally. We know who they are. We don't need to go into that a lot, but that makes a bad situation so much worse. I think an underestimated factor has been people haven't really come to grips with the nature of the medical profession. Now, it's very tricky these days to use the word elite, but in the old sense of the way that word used to be used, the medical profession are historically an elite. They're affluent. They often live in insulated, affluent areas with great health services. They're not the front line of, the cafe with shocking air and internal customers coming at them in a COVID unsafe environment. They extrapolate from their own position. They're often ideologically aligned with conservative political parties, or at least the interests of the rich. And they, these people that we turn to for really sound, objective public health advice, often philosophically and ideologically and in class terms, they're not actually dispassionately looking at the evidence and coming up with sensible recommendations. And that lack of medical consensus has been a big problem at various points in the pandemic. What do we do about it? Well, I think bearing in mind that humans are herd animals, and this problem of the drift to low performance is not a new problem. We know that from other systems. We know that we make our own culture and we can remake our culture. How do we, borrowing some ideas from behavioural economics, how do we change the choice architecture so that we can, spin back up from this drift to low performance? Well, of course, systems thinkers will tell you the first thing you've got to do is establish good absolute standards and work out how to get them adopted. So that's really the challenge at hand. So a couple of ideas on that front. First of all, influencing the choice architecture around ventilation positively in terms of turning it into a really boring technocratic problem. Now, the minute we do that, you end up getting out of that heated posture where you've got to fight people for the truth. If we can turn it into a boring engineering problem akin to what's an appropriate air temperature, heating and cooling wise in a building, that could be an important route through which we can make progress. Of course, Mike Bailey referred to establishing quality air benchmarks. That's absolutely central. There's widespread misunderstanding about that. In terms of the Overton window, we ought to be overshooting on that and not undershooting. We ought to be going for 600, not 1100, knowing that we'll probably end up at about 850, just a thought. Changing the choice architecture in a negative sense, and again, this may well be the slow but ultimately most impactful move we can make, and that is to turn it into an occupational health and safety problem and engage unions. And Andrew, I note your points earlier about how that doesn't always work, and occupational health and safety regulators aren't always interested in these things. But I tell you what, insurers always are. If it's going to cost them money, they're going to be interested. So we should not ignore the insurers as a target for action here. Yes, Andrew mentioned test case litigation. I think this is the most impactful route in terms of a battering ram for change. Again, if you threaten moneyed interests with losing money, well, they're going to take notice and take action, and the insurers are going to be with them on that. So we've really got to get going much more strongly on the test litigation front. And then I think it's really important to kind of use nudge to create a public health good program. And, there's no reason why we as community activists can't organise to do this ourselves. We shouldn't always wait for government. Hopefully we can recruit government to do it. But I think crucially, it needs to not be COVID specific. To the extent that it's not COVID specific, it would get much greater uptake. There'd be much less resistant. Would be depriving, the ferals, the nutbags, the cookers from the fight they always want to have with us. It's important we stop having that fight. It doesn't help. So a good non-COVID specific public health campaign built around fresh air, the virtues of fresh air, the virtues of up-to-date vaccinations. You don't have to say for what, just the general principle, and the benefits of inside buildings, decent CO2 levels, as we know, as a proxy for the likelihood of infection. So that's my offering.